Hello and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. My name is Mark Sullivan. Joining me is...
Delaila Lugo.
Jason Kwasnicki.
Yeah, it's the usual. It's the usual people talking about the usual things, which are the video games. This is a show where we play a game, and we talk about it. Just one game.
There may or may not be lots of other podcasts and videos services like it. I'm not sure. I haven't done the research. But we believe that we are providing a pretty niche service. So better listen up, because there's nowhere else to get shit like this.
Yeah, this is a monthly spoiler cast. We pick a game, we play it, we talk about it, spoil it. So, that being said, if you haven't played the game that we're talking about, stop this episode and go play the game, and then come back and press play. And
so what game are we playing?
Yeah.
Or talking about?
Jason, what game did we play?
Well, this game, I didn't really follow much pre-release.
I didn't ask for a goddamn life story, but he's going to give us one anyway.
You know what? It's important information, okay? It's important background information, so just be quiet. Now, I believe this game by Insomniac Studios was supposed to be an adaptation of a famous comic book character by Marvel Comics, I believe. I believe his name is something along the lines of Spooderman. I don't know. I didn't really pick it up during the game. It bored me to such levels. But, I mean, guys, correct me if I'm wrong.
It was a mistake having you introduce this game. I should have known that.
We're not shitting on this game. It's just going to be Jason. So it should be fun to watch.
Jason, what game did we play? Just say the damn name.
It's Spider-Man.
Okay, specifically Marvel Spider-Man, because that's technically part of the title.
Oh, that is...
Yeah, specifically we're playing Insomniac Games' a PS4 exclusive Marvel Spider-Man that came out in the year of our Lord, 2018.
Oh, yes, our Lord indeed.
Our Lord Stanley. So yeah, real quick, just to give the brief history lesson, one last note is, again, if you haven't played that game, stop, pause.
I also want to make a point that I do not have a lord. I believe in the Force. So
quick
and
history
I
lesson.
I also believe that the Earth is flat. And
wow.
I dare any of you to prove me wrong.
So quick history lesson about Marvel Spider-Man. Sony actually approached Insomniac Games' CEO Ted Price after the launch of Sunset Overdrive, which was late in 2014, about working specifically on a Marvel IP. Ted Price was neutral about it, despite his team being extremely enthusiastic about the prospect of working on a Marvel IP. He believed more in producing original IP and original content, which is something Insomniac has, as far as I know, always done.
Yeah, until Ratchet and Clank.
No, that was their original IP.
Yeah, they did that on the PS2.
All of them?
Yep.
Yeah,
I thought someone else did at least one of the games.
Deadlocked. I believe Deadlocked.
No, Deadlocked was still Insomniac.
What?
Maybe one of the mobile, or not mobile, PSP titles might have been another developer.
Okay.
If not Size Matters, it could have been Secret Agent Clank, or it could have been both. I'm not 100% sure. But
right.
Ratchet and Clank has always been that like they started that IP, they created that IP. That's their original IP.
Mm-hmm.
As a quick aside, he's got an awesome name. Like, do you think he walks into the pitch meetings and just ends it with, "The price is right, bitch"?
So the team was really enthusiastic about the prospect of working on a Marvel IP. So eventually, Ted went ahead and kind of bent to the idea and said, "All right, let's do it." The team actually had the choice of which character they wanted to work on a game for, but it had to be an original story. It couldn't be based... I mean, I guess it could be based on comics in the sense that they could take the character stories, and as long as the base story was an original tale that they were telling, it was open game. And they chose Spider-Man because they felt he was the most relatable, with his life balance between being a hero and being a broke-ass college student.
He's an everyman.
Yeah. So
He's a nerd.
so they
Don't talk about Spooderman that way.
so they chose Spider-Man because of that relatability. So as I started developing the game, a lot of the traversal, and probably if you played Sunset Overdrive and you played Spider-Man, you can really feel that the traversal is very similar. A lot of Sunset Overdrive's feel, I guess, in traversing that open world carried over into Spider-Man, obviously with the Spider-Man concept of swinging on webs and whipping.
Yeah.
Whipping?
Whipping, yeah. Well,
Okay.
he goes whip.
I thought it was.
No, it's whip. It's how it shows
All right.
up. That's how it shows up in the comics. Is whip.
All right.
It's
this
true.
this argument won't get us nowhere.
So despite all that, oh sorry, Delaila, go ahead.
I was gonna say both Sunset Overdrive and Spider-Man have some of the best traversing in video games.
Yeah.
A Sunset with like the rails, kind of like skater theme traversing, and Spider-Man with the web swinging, which is similar to the PS2 one, except much better.
Yeah, and then some background for that. There's a really interesting series that I believe GameSpot has produced. I don't know if it's still continuing, called History of Video Games. And around the time that this Spider-Man game was coming out, they did a history episode of Spider-Man games that went all the way back to the beginning, like I think with the first game being on like NES or something, and went through every Spider-Man game. And the story behind the movie tie-in title for Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one, is actually really interesting because the one game designer, I don't remember his name, wanted the swinging to actually be real time, like real lifelike web swinging. When Spider-Man shoots a web, it has to attach to something, and that's where he's going to swing. So it's a really interesting thing. I recommend looking that episode up and checking it out, just because it's really fascinating. But that carries over into this game too. When Spider-Man flips, the web has to attach to a building or something. So if he's way high above any buildings and skyscrapers and there's like nothing up there, he's not going to be able to swing.
Yeah, like you can't go in the water and do much in this game because there's nothing to swing on.
When I first fell in the water in this game, I was so aggravated. I was stuck in the water for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, he couldn't swim really either.
So to wrap up real quick, in spite of like having the base groundwork for like the traversal down and whatnot, at least for developing an original story, they had a lot of difficulty due to the sheer amount of stories that have been published for this character. They really had to dance around like any past plots and take things and make them work for their own original plot that they had to provide. So the game was officially released to the public E3 2016. It was about 2 years into development at that time. We all saw that press conference. I think it was the second to last thing they showed in that press conference, and showed us a gameplay demo the following year, and the game finally released on September 7th, 2018, exclusively for the PlayStation 4. And it's kind of cool that we're talking about this game this month. We chose this game before this news broke, but in the past like 2 weeks, Insomniac Games was acquired as a first-party worldwide studio for Sony.
Hey.
So we pretty much knew that a sequel was guaranteed. Now it's all but confirmed.
Yep.
Because Sony wants that Spider-Man money.
Don't blame him. Smart move.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I want some resistance.
Oh, well. Too bad. No resistance for you. All right. So that concludes the history lesson. Now we can actually talk about the meat and potatoes, or the spiders and webs of the
Hey.
episode, the game. What did we think?
Just generally, Spider-Man was one of my favorite games that year, which was a game a year of a lot of great games.
Yeah, last year was a really good year for video games.
Yeah, too good. Of course, Red Dead Redemption and God of War overstood it by miles for me personally, at least, and I think even in like an award sense. But this game was just pure fun to me, and it didn't overstay its welcome, which I appreciated. Despite being an open world game with somewhat repetitive tasks, it was all manageable.
Well, it's
to the
funny.
point where people that don't even platinum games platinum this game, which is quite beautiful.
The platinum retention on this game was phenomenal for like an open world game, especially.
Yeah,
like a lot of people that aren't trophy hunters got the platinum for this game just because. There's something to be said about putting, and this is kind of funny in light of Jason not realizing this until we explicitly told him. But there's something to be said about having a percentage that encompasses the entire game, and like everything you do counts towards that percentage. So if you finish the game and you only see like 74%, it's like, oh, I got to get out there, I got to get to 100%. I feel like a lot of modern games don't do that. Like, you have a journal that might tell you, like, oh, you still have this many of this collectible and whatnot, but this game on your save has a percentage there. And to me, that compels me to want to go and complete it. And I think that might have been what kind of aided this.
And also all the collectibles were marked on the map. You didn't need a guide to complete certain things. Like, a lot of it was just achieved naturally.
That is true, in spite of the fact that the collectibles are... really meaningless, boring, and repetitive.
Yeah,
which we'll get to. But Jason, just go ahead. Sorry.
I would agree with what you just said. One thing I will give this game, the way, I don't know if you would say design. I guess you could say design. The way the collectibles and side missions were laid out, and the way the missions were set in terms of their locations. A lot of it could be done like as you're going through the world naturally. Like, for instance, I really had no interest in the side quests or collectibles in this game, other than things I kind of needed to do because it wouldn't spawn a main mission without me getting to like a certain power level, or just because I wanted to, beef up my moves or equipment a little bit. But I was able to naturally do them just by going between the mission points. For example, I was able to get all of you can find these little backpacks with little like mementos that refer to prior accomplishments and story points within the Spider-Man universe. And I was able to 100% complete that just by naturally going through the game. So yeah, I will give Insomniac credit for that, for kind of making everything naturally flow, and you don't really have to go too out of your way in order to get to those side quest missions, what have you.
Yeah. So go ahead, Delaila.
I was gonna say, and they're pointless unless you're a costume whore like me and you just want to get all the Spider-Man suits, which each suit comes with a specific ability. So for me, it added to the gameplay to be able to mix and match the different specials that each costume had, and that for me was like the main pull. But as of just finding backpacks, and I can't even remember, like there were a lot of journals, maybe there were a lot of different collectibles, was kind of like, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was boring. I
think I listed most of them, if not all of them, in our notes here. There were like the bases for the four main factions, the research stations, the backpacks, pigeons.
Oh God, fuck those pigeons.
Little stakeouts for Black Cat, and the worst one, in my opinion, were the crimes. If you want to call them a collectible, they essentially were. But
yeah,
the suits. I felt compelled to get all the suits too. Just a real quick aside, but I never used my suit powers.
Oh,
you
didn't need to.
Yeah, you really didn't. And the suits were just cool in and of their own right. But the problem I had with the suits was I always felt guilty putting one on, because I always do this with any.
You prefer to swing around New York City in the nude?
Yeah,
that was kind of an option, actually.
I'd rather freeball it, Jason.
Literally?
No.
Just have them balls swinging around?
No, Jesus Christ.
They had a shirtless Spider-Man suit.
Not even just shirtless. He's just in his boxers.
Yeah.
But no. I always feel this is in most games. I always feel guilty having like some sort of alternate costume on, because it kind of takes me out of the experience. If I go into like a story cutscene, there's a big story moment, and my Spider-Man happened to be wearing the suit where I'm just in my boxers. It takes me out of the ludonarrative dissonance, let's call it.
Yeah.
As is a popular term coined. That's me personally. The suits were really cool, but I hardly ever used them. Towards the end of the game, when I was just grinding out the remaining crimes, I would cycle between them every one or two crimes just to say, yeah, I used this suit and this one and this one and this one, and I tried to get through them all, but there's just so many. What I wanted to go back and say on the topic of picking up the collectibles as you go, I played through the game recently on New Game Plus and on the hardest difficulty because I wanted the last 2 trophies I needed for the 100%. Yeah, it's not something I really realized or took advantage of in my first playthrough, was the fact that if I just go mission to mission, I can just pick things up on the way. When I unlocked backpacks, like I would clear an entire district and then maybe do a story mission and then clear an entire other district, and by the end of the game I didn't really have much left.
Yeah, that's how I did my initial playthrough as well.
But in doing this playthrough on New Game Plus, where I was just picking things up as I went, I got through the game way faster, and it really fixed a lot of the pacing issues that I'm sure we'll talk about today. Because I know, Jason, you had some issues with the pacing. I kind of do too.
My issues with this game, because Delaila kind of gave her summary on her feelings.
Yeah,
for the most part, I think gameplay wise they did well. I do have a lot of nitpicky issues with the combat, particularly with difficulty, UI, and just general visuals. But overall, I think it was okay. The combat and gameplay overall, particularly the mobility and, like you said, getting the traversal, getting around the city, I think they did really well. That's not my problem with the game. My problem with the game is straight up story.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, I guess there's no better time to jump into it than now. What problems did you have with the story?
Everything besides Stan Lee.
Wow. And all he did was say that MJ and Peter Parker are his favorite in a restaurant.
All right, so thank you for listening to this episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm afraid I might have a stroke if I hear Jason talking. Go, like what? Like go into it, Jason.
All right,
really go into it.
Let me start. Let me. I'm gonna phrase these as kind of questions or points to kind of throw out there, so that you guys can also get a piece. Because I don't want to like rant, because I'll just sound like an asshole, which I am, by the way. It takes a lot of effort. Okay, Delaila. All right, you don't know the kind of strain, because you're a nice person. You could never understand, okay, the weight that I bear being as much of a dick as I am.
This is the Jason Kwasnicki Spoilercast.
But I think we should start at the most important place. Spider-Man / Peter Parker in this game, I would posit he's basically a non-character. He has no arc, no development. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Can you posit some way in which Peter Parker from the beginning changes in the end?
I see what you're saying, and I think the issue with that is that there's so many goddamn origin stories out there for Spider-Man that it's really hard to tell another one without people just being like, why? And so I thought like, just with that context, I thought it made sense for them to kind of get into it where he's already been Spider-Man, you know. And really it gets us to the web slinging, which is what we want to do. But had we had an origin story where there was that sort of development, then I think it it would have gotten buried with all the other origin stories.
Yeah,
Here's
this is
my
a Spider-Man
Oh,
that's
go.
yeah, okay, sorry. We have a Spider-Man that's 8 years into being Spider-Man. Like, and he's already gone through and had a relationship with MJ. And I think that's really where his character development lies, is rekindling that relationship with MJ.
Here's my retort to both of those points at the same time. If I was
boy.
writing this game, so we start the game where he's broken up with MJ. We don't really know why. It's kind of shrouded in mystery, even though the answer is stupid, and we'll get into that later. So he's broken up with MJ, the classic Peter Parker love interest. And like Mark just said, he's been in action for about 8 years now. All right. It doesn't necessarily, you don't need to have a Spider-Man origin story to give a good character arc. Like, how about we start with Spider-Man a bit depressed that he's broken up with MJ. He's dealing with the classic Spider-Man things of balancing his responsibility as a crime fighter with, the everyman responsibilities of having a job, having to pay rent, actually be there for his family, Aunt May, all that stuff. Maybe at the beginning of the game, Peter Parker begins with this idea, well, you know what? Maybe I'll actually step back from this responsibility as Spider-Man. I don't know, something like along the lines of Spider-Man 2, the movie. Maybe if I just take a step back from it a little bit, or totally, maybe New York doesn't necessarily need me after I put away Wilson Fisk and the biggest crime lord or whatnot. Maybe I can focus on my job at Octavius Industries or whatever it's called. Maybe I can try to rekindle my relationship with MJ. And over the course of the game, he realizes I can't step away. This is something basic. I mean, honestly, it's kind of ripping off of the movie Spider-Man 2. It's just the first thing that came to my head.
But
You can write any story where it uses what's come before, and it shows, someone who's a little bit tired, but then they reaffirm the fact that they need to be Spider-Man and they need to shoulder that responsibility.
But how does any of that make for a fun video game? Like,
because you're still going through the act. You're still going to be going through the actions and dealing with
the way this game starts off. The way this game starts off is he gets a message that Fisk is getting is about to get taken down. He's like, oh, I got to be there for this. So he puts on a suit and he jumps out a window and boom, you're playing the game.
Right.
But you're suggesting, I guess, more of like a brooding Peter, like, I'm an adult, I got adult responsibilities, maybe I shouldn't do this whole Spider-Man thing in a game where we're supposed to be playing a Spider-Man.
Right. And my retort to that would be, you start the beginning of God of War as, I mean, obviously Kratos is always a brooding character, but he's a character at the beginning of the previous God of War who is running from his past. He wants to live a peaceful life. He just wants to spread the ashes of his wife on a mountaintop per her request. How does that make for a fun game? How are you gonna fight? How are you gonna fight demons and shit when you're just trying to live a peaceful life and take care of your son?
I'd argue that those are drastically different experiences.
Are they? Maybe something from Peter's past, something that he did, comes back to haunt him. Maybe one of his loved ones gets hurt in a really bad way. And that's another avenue you could go. Maybe Peter Parker is tempted by revenge when it's not necessarily morally right because somebody he loved is seriously injured towards the beginning of the game.
So I guess you're making all these suggestions just because you wish Peter had a more of an interesting character arc, correct?
I wish he had a character arc. He doesn't have one. Nobody's explained to me the character arc.
I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and say that the character arc is the best. But I think it was less important, and this is kind of what I feel Delaila was suggesting, is it's less important for him to have a character arc 8 years into his career than it is for the rise of Doc Ock and to watch Peter, and that's also kind of a big character not necessarily character progression, but like a character conflict where Peter's watching his mentor and the person that he looks up to the most just completely deteriorate and become one of his greatest enemies.
Well, there's issues with that, and that only happens in the last, not even 25%, the
Well,
last 20% of the game.
And something I will
I
say
mean,
is,
I mean, this is just this. I'm basing this just off a fundamental of writing. Characters are the most important part of any story, and you can't have your main character that you're following the most not have an arc. That's just objectively poor writing.
I see. I disagree that he didn't have an arc. I just don't think his arc was the best.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I agree. There was more character development in some other characters than Peter Parker in this specific game. I feel like
Oh, we'll get into that.
fleshing out like Doc Ock and MJ a lot more than they were him, and I think that was kind of the point in a way, which we can get into later when we talk about like MJ, where like he's not like this end all be all hero that can just do anything. Like he's nothing without the people around him. And even in the end, he realizes maybe there's some things he doesn't want to be doing, like using his intelligence to help something that can potentially harm the world, or in this case, New York City. And I think that's the growth in him, like being careful about who he trusts and how he uses his intelligence.
Okay.
And to add real quick to your point about Doc Ock not really showing up to the last third, I genuinely didn't expect it to happen in this game. Like they were leading to it and they were alluding to it. There's the points where he's getting the arms developed and whatnot, and you're in the lab and you see the welding suit, you see the goggles, and you can interact with them. I genuinely didn't think I thought it was just alluding to the next game, because I thought it was getting kind of late in the game to introduce him as a major villain.
Yeah,
and
same.
Sure enough, they went ahead and did it, and it was a big surprise. And I do feel like it mostly worked, despite that I am kind of disappointed him as a villain wasn't more of the game, because
Right.
Doc Ock is Spider-Man's greatest villain.
I agree with you. I agree with you almost 100%, except the end where I don't think it really worked at all, because at that point the game had been building up another villain, and then suddenly we don't see him for a while, and then all of a sudden Doc Ock comes in and it's just distracting, and it takes away from time that could have been spent building up the antagonist. That could have it would almost be like in the first Star Wars, we get Darth Vader for 80% of the movie, and then all of a sudden during the trench run in the Death Star, Emperor Palpatine is flying the fucking X-Wing behind Luke Skywalker trying to shoot him down. Like it's disorienting, and it doesn't make for good narrative flow.
So you're saying that it felt like a Final Fantasy ending, where the main antagonist all along isn't the final boss, it's some fucking nobody that you just have to fight for some reason?
Depending on the Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it's true.
I liked the fact that knowing who is the main villain in this specific game, because obviously the main villain for future games is up for discussion, and also we know who's involved with that towards the end of the game. But like, is Lee the main villain? Is Doc Ock the main villain? Like who's in control of who? All of that was kind of a mystery, even though you knew Otto was going to be Doc Ock. I think that was pretty obvious from the beginning. You didn't know what he was going to do with that power. Like they could have made Doc Ock like help Spider-Man, but they didn't. And I think for me, that's what like kept me on my toes and made it not so predictable. And seeing kind of like how each villain used each other in different ways to reach their own sort of end was really interesting. And we still haven't seen it fleshed out yet, because that we're not going to see all of it till Spider-Man 2 or whatever they call it.
Yeah, they kept Doc Ock's appearance in this game pretty close to the chest, and they did a really good job. Like all promotional material, all trailers, everything, we were led to believe that the main villain would be Lee, would be Mr. Negative.
Yes.
And we got duped. And that in and of itself is sort of impressive in 2018 or 2019 now, but 2018 at the time this game came out. But Yeah, I agree he was underutilized, as unfortunate as it was, but it was a big surprise, and it was cool. What was really cool about the whole plot line was seeing it progress, seeing him every time you go to visit him, he's a little more crazy,
Yeah.
and he's progressing his research and what he's trying to accomplish a little more before he finally snaps. And that's when and that's when I realized, like, oh, this isn't happening in the sequel. This is happening now. Like, we're doing this now.
Yeah. And I like that he wasn't just some over the top villain. Like, he was fleshed out. You understood his motivations. Like, he couldn't really use his body to the capacity that he wants to use it. And so he was building this prosthetic essentially to improve that. And it got to his head, and he used it for bad things.
And I feel the same can be extended to Lee in terms of getting some sort of backstory, so we can feel some sort of sympathy for them. The other villains, again, this is Spider-Man 8 years into his career, and the backpacks really show, like, he's way into his career. He's put Sandman behind bars. Besides the other villains that we fight in this game, he's put Sandman behind bars. He's put Mysterio behind bars. A few others that I know I just can't think of right now. And obviously Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion. He isn't new to this, and so we don't really need backstories for them because they're mostly just side villains. But Lee, we get fleshed out in like the first half of the game. Octavius, we get fleshed out throughout the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
I would argue. Well, let me start with Lee, because that's one of the biggest problems I had. Because Lee, obviously, he's set up in the first two acts kind of as the main villain. All right. But I don't think he was really fleshed out at all. We see him briefly in the beginning as, regular Lee working at Feast, the homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the first scene or two we see him in, he's just a good guy thanking Peter for helping out and stuff. Then we get a scene where Peter shows him this mask that MJ has discovered, the demon mask, and right from there I realized, he was the bad guy, because the way he looks at the mask and he says, "Peter, watch out," the standard foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Okay, so far so good. And then he's like, and then all of a sudden he's just like, "I'm leaving the country. I'll come back when my work is done." And then the next time we see him, he's a demon or whatever. And after that, we get like less than 5 minutes of him interacting with Peter face to face. Almost no dialogue from him. And obviously they're trying to hide his motivations until much later in the game, where we discover through records at Oscorp that as a child Lee was experimented on, and as a result of one of those experiments, his parents were killed by his powers.
Yeah.
But honestly, like there's no dialogue that gives him any menace, any reason for me to be invested in him as a villain. Like, we didn't know Darth Vader's motivations till the end of the second movie, really. We didn't really know anything about his background. But they gave us plenty of time and scenes with him throughout the first two movies for us to see him as an absolute badass that many people liked better than the fucking protagonist of the story. So it was sort of disorienting from a narrative perspective for me. And then, I agree that we did get much more time with Otto, but I feel like his actual descent into insanity, madness, was totally rushed in kind of the last quarter of the game. You don't really see like truly anger until they develop the tentacles and the neuro interface.
Well, to be fair, that's what brings it out. Is that neural interface.
I understand, but what I'm saying, but at least you do get a background for him. But it's totally wasted, I feel, because by the time he actually comes in as a villain, we already have this villain that's then kind of wasted, and I'm just drawn between these two guys, as well as the fact that he lets free a bunch of other side villains, Shocker, fucking
Well,
Rhino,
Shocker got let go
Scorpion.
earlier in the game.
Or yeah, and then he went back. And my point being is that there's just too much bloat in the antagonist side that I can't really connect to any of them.
I kind
To
of
get
wonder.
invested.
I kind of wonder if they blew their load a little too soon on having a Sinister Six
Yeah,
in the very first title. I mean, granted, there's no guarantee that they were going to have a second.
it's like if
So-
the first it's like if the first MCU movie was Avengers.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the Sinister Six are that as important as the Avengers. In
No,
terms
I'm
of
just-
the
I'm
story.
I'm talking pure. I mean purely from a writing perspective in terms of building characters.
Yeah, the Sinister Six had really no plot points in this game. They were really just there to be really fun bosses to fight, and they were.
They were. They really were.
But I agree with you, like in terms of story, like they could have not been in there and this not been in the game, and the story would have not have changed at all. But in terms of gameplay, I think they really added to it, especially towards the end where you get to fight all of them individually and then in pairs, which I thought was extremely fun, especially fighting against Rhino's big ass.
Yeah.
And I guess my problem is just, from my perspective, Martin Lee could have not been in this game at all, and you could have had the same exact plot, just have some faceless terrorist organization
See, I think
taking the exact same actions, trying to kill Norman Osborn at the award ceremony. You could, and then it's revealed towards the end of the game that it's Otto funding them and organizing them.
so. There's a couple reasons why I think he was more integral, at least to the planning of this game. He's a lesser known villain. I think he's fairly new, actually. Like within the last decade, he's been introduced into the comic verse. So they kind of wanted to, at least with the previews, he's the only one that we knew would be in the game. So having a fairly new, unknown Spider-Man villain in the game, and it allowed them to kind of dupe us into, well, who is going to be in this game? Like Mr. Negative's like a pretty new villain, not like as iconic as all these other villains. So who and all are we getting? And it kind of led to a lot of speculation. It kind of led to a lot of ponderance leading up to its release, until we, of course, got that trailer with the gameplay trailer of going through Raft and seeing Electro, seeing Scorpion, Rhino, etc., etc. So I think he was there for those reasons, like really to kind of dupe us all and not and throw us off the trail of who was actually going to be in this game.
Yeah, and plus Norman and Otto, if I'm remembering correctly, are the ones that altered Lee's body to be Mr. Negative.
Yes, and in this story at least, I'm not sure about the original in the comics, but in this story, like he tied in with Norman and Otto. Part of what led to the schism between Norman and Otto, because of all the research. Otto grew to dislike how much it was hurting others. He wanted to help the world, not harm it. So it kind of plays in. I understand where you're coming from, but I think Lee does have a place in this game. Also, the probably the most important reason he's in the game, they needed a sixth.
Oh.
Right. So let's move on to another thing. Jason, what else did you not like? Let's get all through your points here.
So Miles Morales and Mary Jane.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Could have been completely, in my opinion, could have been completely removed from this game, and it would have made me so happy. I'm talking both in terms of story and gameplay. I absolutely hated the segments of this game where you had to play as them. They were boring segments that broke the pacing. Like you've been playing as Spider-Man with all these powers, and all of a sudden
And all the
You
speed
have to.
too.
Yeah, and these scenes take up so much time, and I'm the whole time I when I was playing, I was audibly irritated, like almost yelling, just to fucking be over. Um, and in terms of story, why I didn't like these characters, I mean, Miles Morales I've never been into just because he's a carbon copy of Peter Parker. There's nothing that really makes him his own, and that frustrates me.
That's not
Um,
entirely true. He does have unique powers.
no, I'm not talking about I'm just talking about
His character.
story. Yeah, his character. Um, and in terms of Mary Jane's story in this game, so it begins off that, for some mysterious reason, Peter and MJ had broken up. And then it turns out that Mary Jane broke up with Peter because, as Spider-Man, Peter was always, quote unquote, treating her like a baby and always rescuing her and not letting her do what she wanted to do. Fine, okay, cool. That's a cool place to like build off of in terms of the two of them ultimately at the end having a stronger relationship. But then throughout the game, Mary Jane then proceeds to do stupid things that warrant her being treated like a baby, like fucking going into the hideouts and headquarters of dangerous gangs and mercenary groups, which, like, realistically, she'd fucking get killed if she went into by herself. But luckily, Spider-Man's always there to save her. And then at the end of the game, her arc ends with her being like, "Oh, well, I guess I just get frustrated because you're the one saving me all the time." Which, no shit, Sherlock, because you're a fucking idiot. And like, I would have just loved if I would have loved it if Mary Jane had just been removed from the game, and there was a love story that was developed with Yuri, the cop that you're always talking with on the phone, because she was such a more likable character than Mary Jane in this game, and she had way more chemistry over the radio with Spider-Man
See, I
than
don't
Mary
agree
Jane
with that.
than Spirit. No, like just from a dialogue perspective, Yuri had way more chemistry with Peter than Mary Jane
I
did in
don't,
their actual cutscenes.
but I don't think that chemistry translates to romantic chemistry in
So
any
so let's
way.
face it. Let's face it. Mary Jane always sucked in comic books, in movies. She was
See,
just a
Ivan,
boring like ornament for Spider-Man, and she was
Delilah, are
some
you
like
really gonna do that to my girl
actress.
Kirsten Dunst?
Yo, Kirsten Dunst. I mean, whatever. She was just there. She was trying to be this aspiring actress, and she was just there to be Spider-Man's ornament. And no, no. This Mary Jane, however, like she had like that like Lois Lane or
yes,
if you will, like Karen from like Daredevil kind of vibe. The journalist who's like trying to like uncover these stories, which made good pacing for the storytelling, but also she had her own motivation. She wasn't just all about
the
like what
difference.
Spider-Man doing,
The difference, though, is that Lois Lane can fucking take care of herself. She fucking beats the shit out of people in the comics.
Jesus
Like,
Christ.
Lois Lane is fucking awesome. Mary Jane in this game, like, she's just always getting held up and shit, and then Spider-Man just comes in and saves her.
Until the end when she saves him, and I think that was the point, right? Like that she like even, like she was super spunky, and she got a lot out of people, a lot of stories out of people, and she discovered a lot of information, which is what moved the story forward. But at that very end of the game, like she saved Spider-Man and Aunt May and Miles Morales, and that like that was something that she wanted out of their relationship for the longest time. And she did it because he probably would have died if it wasn't for her.
I think of all adaptations we've seen with Mary Jane, like this is the one where she's been the most go gettery.
Yeah.
She's very outgoing in this. She doesn't just sit to the sidelines. Like she wants to get out there and be helpful and do things. And that's kind of why we got those gameplay segments, to see that she's not just sitting at a computer looking things up. No, she's sneaking into she is sneaking into things because she wants to be helpful, and she is to an extent until she does get into trouble and admittedly needs to be saved. Although
Yeah.
there are the whole plot line of her getting pissed because she doesn't want to be treated like a child. There are situations where she didn't necessarily need to be saved. Jason, you didn't do the Tombstone missions, correct?
No, I don't
Yeah.
even know what you're talking about.
There's a side quest where there's a lesser known villain named Tombstone. There's a side mission quest line involving him. And during one of those missions, Mary Jane sneaks into his chop shop, and there's no Spider-Man involvement during that mission.
Yeah.
She gets in, she gets the info
I
and gets
remember
out.
that. I remember that mission.
Oh wait, that's a main
That's a
story
main
mission that
story
kicks
mission.
off that mission. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My mistake. So yeah, like that's one that where he doesn't really have any involvement. She's not like entirely useless, I guess we can say.
I'm not saying she's useless. She just does dumb things, and her character, her dialogue, it's just annoying.
Okay.
Well, I will agree the gameplay portions with Miles and MJ weren't the funnest, and they could have captured her motivations and his Miles' character development without necessarily making us do these weird stealth sequences.
Yeah.
Because they did a good job of explaining that just through cutscenes and stuff like that, and dialogue.
Yeah, those missions were painfully slow. They did break up the fast-paced action of the game. They were painfully slow. They weren't particularly difficult. Like, there was one mission that I sort of struggled with and got caught twice in a row, and then was able to make it through. And it's just because I was trying to rush through it because I just wanted it to be done and over with.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not really that hard. You push over a box of tools. The dude says, "Oh, what's that over there?" And then you go the other way. It's really not. It's really not that. They're not that difficult, and they are much slower than the rest of the game. So I understand the whole breaking up of the pacing. I don't agree with removing them entirely, especially not Miles. Go ahead, Jason, before I continue.
No, all I was gonna say was I was like half expecting like one of the guards during those missions to be like Metal Gear style. Who's doing this?
Rhino basically did that.
Yeah. When it's the end of Act 1 where Lee attacks the rally, I was blown away and super surprised. Holy shit, I'm playing as Miles. So I didn't expect that either.
Yeah, that was very unexpected.
And while they were literally the same thing as the Mary Jane like sneaking missions and whatnot, they were no different. The difference being he can hack shit on his phone.
Yeah.
Where she can throw lures and eventually stun gun people. He can hack shit on his phone, which is, that's fine. That's neat, I guess. It's the same basic concepts.
It serves the same functional purpose.
Yeah, create distraction, move. Create distraction, move.
The only way I see this fleshing out in a good way is we're playing as Miles now, who doesn't have powers, and when I think we're inevitably going to play as Miles when he does have his powers, which they reveal at the end of the game. He has his powers.
We can make that our first mention of the setup for the sequel.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if they're setting up for maybe even co-op gameplay with both of them being available.
I'm not anticipating that. I'm anticipating that it's gonna be like a Metal Gear Solid 2 situation. Fun plug.
Maybe.
Our last episode was Metal Gear Solid 2. Go ahead and listen to that if you haven't. Go play the game first though. I think it's gonna be a Metal Gear Solid 2 situation. Not where they trick us, but where we're now going to be viewing Peter Parker, Spider-Man, through different eyes. And we're going to be playing as novice Miles. Because it kind of makes more sense to do that in the same way. Spider-Man's 8 years into his career. Who knows how many he'll be in the sequel. And he doesn't need to go through a tutorial. But Miles sort of does. He's brand new. He's going through puberty. He's
No, he's not. He tells Peter when because he thinks at the end
is a joke.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
but I'm pretty sure he was supposed to be framed.
What's your obsession with balls on this episode, man?
Christ, Jason. Remember that episode? I think it was 2 episodes ago where you said balls, like you brought balls up.
Oh yeah.
Like maybe 4-5 times.
Okay.
Anyway, I Miles needs to be tutorialized. He needs to be trained. He needs to be introduced into being a Spider-Man. So And Miles traditionally has several unique powers that Spider-Man doesn't have, or Peter Parker doesn't have, I should say. I don't even know the actual names for them. If you've watched Spider-Verse, you know what I'm talking about. The invisibility and the little zappy shock thing.
Yeah, it's wow.
Venom
it's at the
Strike,
tip of my
I think
tongue.
is what it's called.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's what it's called. Okay, yeah. It's like those are unique powers to him. So I think that when we do get a sequel, it might even involve Peter getting himself into trouble and getting captured, and Miles has to go save him, and that's the plot of the game. That's what I'm anticipating, and that's why I think that's what the setup. I don't think they'll go so far as to do co-op. I really hope they don't. I don't want to do co-op Spider-Man. That doesn't sound fun to me.
I don't know. I was just throwing that out there.
Yeah. But
could be good.
I think having Miles in the game was super valuable. And he had a decent arc. His father got killed. Jefferson Davis.
After helping Spider-Man in a mission.
Yeah, he got killed. He was already a hero of the city. He gets murdered, and Miles is grieving, and he goes to work at Feast, and get his life together. And he had a moving story, and became friends with both Spider-Man and Peter Parker before realizing that they're the same person.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's basically, I mean, it's a little different than the exact origin of Peter Parker, but very similar.
He is a carbon copy in the sense that he's a really intelligent teenager.
Yes,
and he's a nerd
that suffers loss. Suffers loss and learns to take on responsibility to cope with it, and because it's the right thing to do. But again,
what comes with great responsibility.
I just wasn't invested enough in the character for it to really have any emotional impact. Just because we don't see him that much.
You just have a heart of stone, man.
It's not a heart of stone.
He likes dark, edgy shit. I notice.
No, it's not even that I like dark, edgy. I actually prefer lighthearted adventure. Like I'm a major Star Wars, Indiana Jones. Like I like pulp action adventure.
Gotcha.
Just like as a writer, and as somebody who studies writing a lot, like there's just a lot to criticize. I like to be critical of anything, even things I like. I like to be critical of the writing, and there's just a lot to criticize here, unfortunately.
No, I'm glad that you have a different opinion than us. I think it makes for a better spoiler cast, because the other ones I've listened to, everyone's like, yeah, this is great, and I heard like barely any criticism. So it's good. I think it's good to hear. It's good to hear that, and I see where you're coming from in many aspects.
Yeah, in a way, we're really happy that you hate everything and don't know fun, Jason.
I don't hate everything. Our last episode was literally us masturbating to Metal Gear Solid 2.
This is true. You and I do love that game quite a bit. Delaila got to see it firsthand. Anyway, all right. What's your next plot point that you hated? I want to get through all the plot points.
Just a real quick point, and I don't think any of us will disagree on this. Silver Sable, it's like she comes in. I hate you, Spider-Man. Me and my Russian goons will take you down. And then all of a sudden, like right before the last mission, Spider-Man, you're not as bad as I thought. I will leave this country. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay, Silver Sable.
That does admittedly come out of nowhere. I will say, I know we didn't want to discuss this much.
It goes into the DLC.
I will say, and if you played the game but haven't played the DLC, pause or skip ahead like 20 seconds. Silver Sable does come back in the DLC to help you with the main threat in that plot. But we don't need to necessarily go into we're not going to go into that plot. We're not going to talk about the DLC because it's basically more of the game but with a higher difficulty curve.
Even in the main game, the Sable soldiers or whatever they're called was a difficulty spike.
Yeah,
like they were way harder than any of the like Fistmen or whatever
Yeah,
the demons.
that's a good segue into one of
To
the points
gameplay.
that I really
Yeah.
wanted to. Well, just one specific point that I really want to talk about is the fucking enemy types. The fucking Sable people and the demons fucking
Are
sucked.
annoying.
They were
Well,
so unfun to fight against.
that is directly tied into something I mentioned in the beginning when I said, for the most part, the gameplay is the combat's okay. One big criticism I have of the gameplay is the design of namely the UI and the coloring of the combat. Like, I don't know who was in charge of UI and the design of the demons. I don't know who thought it was a fucking good idea to make the signal that comes up above your head for the Spidey sense when it's time to dodge.
Rock steady.
To make that the same to make that the same fucking color as the demon miss, so that you can't see what the fuck is going on when you're in the middle of a fight.
I mean, I think that's pretty standard across most like cartoonish like that even happens in Spider-Verse. That I know it's happened in other Spider-Man games.
That's a nitpick. The real thing I want to touch on, and this ties into what you were just saying, is that as these factions are piled in and the quote unquote difficulty ramps a bit up, it's not really that the difficulty necessarily is ramping up because the AI is getting more intelligent or there's a wider move set. It's just because the game starts throwing more and more shit at you at once, to the point where it literally becomes impossible to dodge shit, and you have to start kind of cheesing in order to get through fights within a reasonable amount of time.
I think the thing about
and
those
just
moments,
throwing as many gadgets and powers as you can.
I think that sometimes the gameplay, the combat does devolve into that, but I think what they were trying to accomplish, each faction like brought on new enemy types with new different weapons. The demons had those stupid fucking whips. I hated those things, but they were trying to encourage, as you're leveling up, you're getting new moves to add to your arsenal,
right?
And they were trying to encourage you to use them. But
it gets hard to keep track of all the different types of everything.
Yeah, there are a lot.
And there's a lot of stuff in that arsenal that not the gadget arsenal, but the move arsenal that I just never used because I forgot that they existed.
Yeah,
right. And you some of it is just difficult to pull off. Like,
yeah, and a lot of them, some of the button combinations, like certain buttons will do different things if you're in the air, or there's not too much consistency, but between what buttons do what at certain situations, and that kind of leads to a little bit of confusion. I also just fell into the trap of realizing that certain things work 95% of the time,
right?
And like my biggest way of like taking out enemies really quickly was just webbing them up and swing kicking them into a wall.
Oh, yeah.
So they get attached to a wall. Yeah.
Or and I even realized in an even better way sometimes, especially with enemies in the air, like the fucking Sable dudes with jetpacks. Fuck those guys too. But web them up in midair, and then if you press and hold triangle, I think it takes you into a swing move where you like swing them around and throw them. In midair, you'll do that when they're webbed up, throw them at the ground, and they'll stick to the ground, and they're done.
Yeah.
Done. Over and done with.
And it's easy to find those kinds of ways out when it's like open ground. But when you start getting into tight, close quarters, then you start to realize the game has a lot in terms of options for you to approach combat. But it's almost too much at times where like you'll be trying to use your mobility to outclass your enemies. And all of a sudden you find that you get stuck to a wall, or you perfectly dodge one like rocket attack or bullet attack only to accidentally dodge into another rocket or bullet. And like once you get hit by something in this game, like you can almost count on 100% getting beat on, to the point where like your health is almost out by like 5 other things. It's just it gets frustrating. It gets frustrating towards the end.
Yeah,
it's not satisfying difficulty like something in God of War where it's really towards the end, especially when you're getting into something like the Valkyrie fights, it's all skill. Like if you're getting your ass beat, it's not because the game is cheating or is just being ridiculous. It's because you don't have the skill.
Yeah, there's not much skill involved in the combat in this game. But the skill, so to speak, is in you using the different gadgets towards different enemies. That's how you were able to avoid all of that annoying, like dodging a rocket into a rocket stuff, by using specific gadgets towards specific enemies. And it was a lot to really chew, and I only was able to do it successfully because that's just what I do in games anyway. But for somebody that kind of sticks to what works, like you could, if you're getting away with sticking to one thing for the whole game, and then all of a sudden you have to use all these gadgets, which in this game that was the case, then it's kind of hard to just readjust to that. So yeah, that spike was jarring.
And it's weird because I wasn't always stuck in doing the same thing every single time. When the game reaches a certain point and the enemies do start to get really frustrating to deal with, I find and remember a new combo that I just start using over and over again because those enemy types keep showing up, and that's really when it starts. I feel like at the beginning of the game, when most of the enemies are much more generic, it's a lot easier to mix it up and do
and it's
more
a lot more
interesting
fun.
things. Yeah,
It's a lot more fun because you're pulling off cool shit. Like
right.
And you have the room to maneuver to do it.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, tell me that Wilson Fisk, which was your first boss fight in the game, wasn't just a tutorial for the big enemies in this game. Like I feel like that was his only purpose besides like helping you fight the demons eventually.
Yeah, and giving us a tutorial sort of boss and introduction to the story. Yeah, no, he really was. You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
Which is disappointing because he's one of the more interesting characters in the Marvel universe, or in terms of villains, at least.
Oh, totally.
I wish he had been used more.
Did you have any other things you wanted to complain about the story of this game?
No, I mean, I think I've said my piece.
Okay.
Again, it's just. I said once upon a time when we did Days Gone that the game basically needed an editor, and I think this game needed an editor as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a gripe that I'd like to mention. There were very many characters in this game that served no purpose, and we didn't really name them, and I'm going to just do it really quick. Number one being Screwball. She was annoying.
Who the fuck is Screwball?
It's like a side mission. She kind of served like...
I did like 0 side missions because I just wanted to...
She was a minor villain. I don't remember when she's another recent villain introduced in like the comics, and she was used in this game.
I should just put forward for all listeners, I do not read Marvel comics really. I've read like maybe a handful. I'm a DC guy, so like I have no knowledge of the actual...
Now we know the true ulterior motive for hating this game. He's mad he hasn't gotten the good Superman game he's been waiting for since Superman 64.
Dude, fuck Superman. I want Green Lantern game.
So, yeah, Screwball she's a weird one. She's interesting. And the main reason I feel they used her is because she's kind of a villain that utilizes social media, essentially. And that's a really big thing in our society. In real life, it's a very big thing in the society that the setting of Spider-Man takes place in. I mean, you even have constant access to Spider-Man's Twitter feed and the New York City Twitter feed in your main menu. So I think that's why they decided to incorporate her. It's because social media is a big thing in our society, and it's even incorporated in the game in some capacity, that they were like, oh, screw it, we can fit her into a side mission. What's even worse is that she takes over for Taskmaster in the DLC as your challenge provider.
Yeah.
And that's when she's super annoying. I actually totally forgot. You had to remind me today, Delaila, that she actually had a side mission in the base game, because I thought that she was I completely forgot about that and thought that she was just brought in for the DLC to be that challenge provider. And holy shit, did I try to suppress that.
Yeah, that was the worst thing.
Of how annoying that whole shtick was.
I also felt Black Cat was unnecessary. Her only purpose was to serve as a cock block for Mary Jane, even in the DLC. But definitely in the main story, like it was cool, like taking pictures of the little cat figures everywhere and finding her. But once again, just like she was just there.
I think think more to that point is she was there to provide another collectible. And the side or the DLC came out fast enough after the main game came out, because they were on a 1 month cycle. A month after the game came out, the first DLC came out, then the second, then the third, months, like 1 month apart. So they obviously knew that she was going to be a major character in the first DLC at least. So they wanted to give her some sort of introduction. That's when she was really kind of a cock blocker for Mary Jane in the DLC. But in the main game,
Wait, does she actually cock block Peter Parker?
No, not exactly. She insinuates.
Does Peter Parker cheat on MJ?
No, she insinuates all right, skip ahead 30 seconds if you haven't played the DLC. I guess we are spoiling a bit of this. She insinuates that she has a child, and Peter's worried that it's his.
Oh shit!
That's the whole DLC. It was a
some
fucking
actual
Maury show.
drama?
That first DLC is actually really good for the plot. The rest of the plot's really good too, but that first DLC alone is excellent.
Wait, if Peter Parker didn't cheat on MJ, why would he think it's his?
No, he banged Black Cat before when he broke up with MJ or something like that.
Yeah, they dated before.
Oh shit!
Oh my
god!
Shit.
Drama alert!
It's a fucking soap opera. That DLC.
Some sex and stuff.
Anyway, we're gonna stop talking about the DLC now.
Spider-Man and Black Cat, Netflix and chill, y'all.
But she did it just to steal something.
So okay.
Oh, his virginity.
As far as the base game goes, God, she's just there to introduce another collectible. That's pretty much the only reason, and to give you another suit.
Yeah.
Which it was cool. That was one of the coolest suits in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
pretty much. What kind of suit does she give him?
It's entirely black with a very slender red spider.
Is it leather and shiny?
Actually, yeah, it kind of is.
It is shiny.
What's Peter Parker's safe word?
What other characters, Delaila? Any others?
Like I said, Shocker running in the beginning, Taskmaster, like they were just there for gameplay purposes, and they were great for gameplay purposes.
Taskmaster and Tombstone especially, like they're lesser villains that they wanted to incorporate, I guess, just as side content. And I think as side content they definitely worked well. Shocker was pretty much just a throwaway. Here's your second boss. He's gonna rampage around the city, and you got to stop him.
Yeah. The Scorpion fight reminded me a lot of the Scarecrow fight in Batman Arkham Knight. Or was it Arkham City? No, it was Arkham Knight. I
wouldn't know.
Illusions and stuff.
Arkham Knight's on PlayStation Plus this month, so
for free.
Yeah, I can find out. But
speaking of which, just a quick note, going back to like gameplay wise, I really did enjoy the segments where you had to, or at least optionally could, approach in a stealth manner. I thought that was like almost more fun than just going in and trying to rack up combos and using different gadgets and shit in all-out battle.
Oh yeah, I definitely used the shit out of stealth.
Yeah, it was cool. Like, you had to find like the right perches and distract enemies and take them down. I always got annoyed. Eventually, I just started jumping into battle situations because I always got tired of seeing the same perch animations. Yeah. I just eventually, because they take like maybe a good 10 seconds every single time, and when there's like 15 enemies, that time adds up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I just eventually realized, well, if I just jump in, do one stealth takedown, and then beat everyone else up with gadgets, I feel like I'm gonna be a lot more engaged in this. But the stealth was still pretty good, pretty intuitive.
Yeah, definitely.
Any more characters you found to be utterly useless?
No, I think that's about it. Most of the villains pretty much, and just the villains.
Let's talk about some of the other characters, the major characters that we haven't really touched on. We haven't really touched much on Yuri. We talked a lot about MJ, Otto, Miles, and Sable a bit, but yeah, we haven't really talked about Yuri.
Yeah, Jason wants Yuri to be Peter Parker's bae.
Yeah,
I'm not even joking when I say I think they should have taken Miles and MJ out of this game and made Yuri the primary supporting character. She's badass. She has awesome dialogue. Like, we could have had actual cool action scenes with her. There could have been some kind of relationship. Maybe it doesn't even have to be romantic. Maybe it could be like just flirty, but like she's still her own independent woman and she doesn't want to. Maybe like Peter Parker asked her out on a date at the end and she totally denies him. I don't know. She's like she's like one of the few characters I wanted more out of in this game.
Well,
yeah, they had the best dialogue together.
I guess again, if you haven't played the DLC, skip ahead like a minute or two.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I know. All these things you guys that Jason wanted, they're in the DLC. Yuri has a big arc in the DLC with taking down Hammerhead, and in the last episode of DLC, it's relegated to side content of tracing her down because she is basically on the run, and it very much alludes to her becoming who she is in the comics as a villain, Wraith.
Yuri's a villain?
And she becomes Wraith at some point.
Yeah, but in the game, she does go down a dark path because she becomes obsessed with taking down that
Hammerhead.
Yeah,
and winds up shooting him in the head, and then gets incarcerated for it. She winds up going on the run, and you find out that she's very much on a bad path.
Yeah,
and the insinuation is that this is leading to her becoming Wraith. But I'm guessing you're going to yell and say, this is what should have been in the main game.
I was literally just going to say that would have been such a better story.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame
about
the DLC is like it basically is a whole second campaign, but a lot of people are going to wind up not really playing it and giving it a shot because it's DLC. But it really is like its own second campaign. It's less urgent, it's less demanding of you to play than the main game is, but there's still a lot of really interesting cool stuff that happens. It's just a shame that the difficulty curve is so high.
That's like that would have been such a better like having a twist 2/3 of the way into the main campaign that she becomes Wraith and ends up being the ultimate villain would have been such a better twist than anything we got in the main campaign.
Well, save it for the sequel.
Yeah, it's definitely going to happen in the sequel in some way, shape, or form.
But, all right, enough about the DLC. I'm done. I said we're not going to talk about it, and damn it, we've already talked about it way too much.
Just leave out the DLC. The only other character I really wanted to make any mention of was Osborn, who everybody is. Osborn is probably the most interesting villain in this game, and he only really gets any time on. He gets like maybe 3 minutes of him actually being on screen, and the rest of it is just everybody fucking talking about him.
No, he gets more than 3 minutes, Jason.
I would almost guarantee it's less than 3 minutes if you actually counted up
it is not
his screen time.
3 minutes, but he is an interesting villain, and it's not even what he's better known for. It's just Osborn. It's just Mayor Osborn, and there is some sort of, do we want to just go into the other big setup for sequel plot point?
Yeah,
because it's integral to Osborn's arc, quote unquote. I guess you could say.
Yeah, how about that second big reveal during the credits?
I was confused at first because I thought in the tank that Harry was like Green Goblin. I didn't know if he was Green Goblin or if that was the Venom thing,
that was
whatever you call it.
The insinuation
the symbiote
definitely seems to be that
symbiote. Is that what it's called?
The Venom symbiote, yeah. And that's what Harry. So Harry is ostensibly going to be our Venom in the sequel. So yeah, that was a big surprise.
Yeah, I flipped my shit. I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, right.
That
That was-
explains why we didn't have a Venom suit.
That was a cool twist. I will give the game that.
Yeah, that's
And-
another. Sorry,
sorry.
Jason, go ahead.
All I was gonna say was it made me again wish that they had just dropped Osborn, or not Osborn, Octavius and Martin Lee, and just made maybe Osborn could have been the main villain, and then I don't know, maybe Yuri is the twist, and the people in the game I was actually somewhat invested in because they had interesting stories.
Well, I think that's what we're gonna really get in the sequel, and we'll talk about that just right before the end of the show. Osborn's getting set up more for a villain role. Harry definitely is going to play an interesting role, being our supposed Venom in the sequel. So we'll see where that goes. One thing that you made me realize, Delilah, is that that's why we didn't get a Venom suit.
Yeah.
But that also the surprise inclusion and large involvement of Miles explains why we never got the Miles Morales suit either.
Yeah.
It just kind of dawned on me. Because I know that was a big complaint leading up to launch when they were showing off, oh, you get this suit, and everyone's like, where's the Miles Morales suit? Why can't we use that? And they're like, oh, we didn't want to include that one. It's like, well, now we know why.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I do agree that Osborn maybe could have been a little more. He could have had a little more involvement, but everyone was kind of after him. It kind of makes sense that he was under some sort of protective custody, being hidden away, being hard to find, and therefore not getting too much screen time. Because everyone was gunning for his head.
Well, I mean, again, if I was in charge of writing it, I would have completely removed those plot points and just made it that there was a big mystery and it looked like it was all pointing to Osborn.
I'm starting to think,
or maybe it was all pointing to Osborn, and maybe Yuri wanted to get revenge on Osborn, and hence she becomes the Wraith, and that's the twist, and she betrays you.
That's not it. But
I mean, I'm literally just spitballing right off the top of my head. I'm not even thinking about it.
I think this is Jason's way of telling Insomniac that he wants to work for them.
I don't want to fucking work for Insomniac. I want to work for Square Enix so that the next Final Fantasy doesn't suck.
Wow.
So, all right. So now we've talked a decent amount about Yuri. We've talked a decent amount about Osborn. The last bit that I want to talk about is the last person I want to talk about is I feel like it's a little important to talk about Aunt May.
Oh.
Because she does play a decent role in the game. I would say one of the better and more respectable side roles. And
she dies.
She dies at the end, and it is. I feel that it's a very, very powerful death, and it got an emotional response from me.
I will admit that Aunt May was sprinkled enough and was there enough and had good, like, her dialogue. I thought was some of the best written dialogue and had the most chemistry with Peter, aside from Yuri. I thought all her scenes worked, and I will admit that I agree with what you just said, that her death scene did have a lot of impact. Although I wished it was worked in such a way that it kind of tied in with some kind of character arc for Peter Parker that also tied into the plot that was going on around them.
I would say it did. He had to choose between saving Aunt May or keeping the antidote so it could be mass produced and save everyone else. So he gave up the needs of himself for the needs of many.
Yeah, but it's not like he wasn't already doing that.
No, fair enough. I guess it's not really much of a development if we knew that's what he was going to do all along. I guess it would have been a bigger surprise if he said, "Fuck all y'all, I'm saving my aunt."
That would have been actually an awesome twist.
Would have been, awesome in the sense that no one would be expecting it. But
and then
awful would that be?
And then Miles, like, when he discovers that Peter is Spider-Man, is like, "Yo, fuck off, man. I idolized you. I'm gonna be a better Spider-Man."
That would be.
I'll be called
Spider-Man.
I'll be called Spooderman.
We'll get that in Spider-Man What If when that's a thing. if that's ever a thing. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to bring up about Aunt May. I thought it was important to bring up because
Yeah.
Although the one thing I will say is like she's just like I always knew it was you, Peter. Like how the fuck does everybody just know magically that
to
Peter
be
Parker's
fair to
Spider-Man?
her, like her having as much direct involvement in Peter's life as she does, like yeah, it'd be really obvious to her that he's Spider-Man. Like it would very obviously be obvious. That was a really redundant sentence, but you understand what I'm saying.
I mean,
It's
obviously.
like, Peter, why didn't you answer my phone calls? Oh, I was taking a nap. Oh, well, why you were? What? It's funny because the exact time I tried calling you, Spider-Man stopped a bank robbery. Like, oh, that's sure is a funny coinkydink.
But to Jason's point, also Doc Ock knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And that's also really obvious. He
apparently-
saw him with his suit and like the whole thing where he's like, "Oh, you make
Well-
his stuff." It's like, yeah, okay, he makes his stuff.
Well, true, but at the same time, like if Doc Ock is going through this progression where he's like building up this, it's kind of insinuating that he's been building up this plan against Norman Osborn all along. Like, and this is a confusing part where, like, in some ways, it insinuates that even before he develops the tentacles and the neuro interface, he's been working with Martin Lee. And then in other ways, that just doesn't make sense.
No,
Because even before that happens and like Doc Ock becomes Doc Ock, like they develop like the tentacles. Even before that, Martin Lee is talking about how he has a debt, which like it's insinuated that debt is to Otto Octavius.
no, I think the debt.
I don't. It's confusing and like
I think the implied debt was to Avendra's parents.
I mean it
Pretty
could
sure
work
that was
that
the
way.
implication.
I
But
don't know.
I
There's
will-
not enough dialogue to really get anything.
I will agree. Like, he definitely wasn't working with Lee, but the whole pacing of that final part when Otto finally turns, somehow he's able to get in contact with those other villains, get enough info and whatnot, and how he can turn their lives around and get it to them. Like it doesn't really add up. The timeline just doesn't really match. How could he do that so quickly?
And like when he talks about like calling in favors for shit, when they're just like talking about getting research funds and materials and shit, like I almost felt like it was kind of implied that he was getting illegal help the entire time. Like he's quote unquote calling in
Oh, that's
favors.
entirely possible.
I'm like, is this implying that he's really been planning this the entire time? Which would totally negate his quote
I
unquote
think-
descent into madness. Like, it's confusing.
I really think they kind of didn't foresee how confusing that would be, and how the timing, the timeline of all that just doesn't really add up. Because to us, it seems like that all happened in less than a day, but that can't be the case. But I think we're supposed to believe, we're supposed to be under the impression that maybe happened over the span of a few days or a week.
Right, and that's the downfall of having an open world game is like when the story, the flow of the story can get really fucked up.
That game did combat that a bit by giving you those free periods where you didn't have a main story mission, and Spider-Man would be like, "Oh, got some time now. Better go patrol the city." And I guess the implication is like during one of those periods, we were supposed to believe that him taking down some dudes that jacked a car took a week.
Yes.
And then he got a call saying, "Hey, fucking get over here. This is a main story mission." Oh, okay, I'll be right there. I guess that's what was like how that was supposed to be taken, but it kind of fell flat.
Well, all this time, he's also creating the Antioch suit that you use to fight Doc Ock at the very end.
Oh yeah, he develops that in like record time. Like Spider-Man goes to he goes to the lab and then develops this entirely advanced suit in what?
In like
3 hours?
20 yeah, in like 20 minutes. Like it's like Doc Ock has been spending the entire game developing these tentacles. He has to like call in favors. It's probably some like from like some rich mercenary company in Africa sending him precious metals from like Nigeria
Also,
or some shit like that, like some vibranium
You mean
or whatever.
Wakanda?
or Wakanda.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually.
no, that's why I was about to say like vibranium, or I guess what is it's adamantium. Adamantium is the actual name of it, but they can't use it in the movies. I don't know if they can use it in the game, but um.
I gotta.
Anyway, the point being is like, where does Peter get all these fucking resources and shit?
Well, he got
It's
them, I
like,
guess, from the lab somehow. But like, another question is, what the fuck did that suit even do?
I guess it was because it was the same material. It resisted the tentacles.
Okay, like sure, why not? I
It didn't even look that cool.
I don't know. I thought it looked kind of cool. I just don't know like what made it anti-Ock. What is there an Uncle Ock? Like what made it so special? I don't get it.
Also, and this will be like this is really the last thing I have to say, and it's not like a huge thing. It's just a small like point of confusion I had, like in the final fight with Doc Ock, when Doc reveals that he knew it was him, and Peter all of a sudden gets really fucking pissed off. He's like, "You knew all along?" It's like he's been a fucking villain. Like you saw him just like become crazy. Why does this especially make you angry?
Because that was like his dad.
Pretty much, yeah.
know.
He became like a father. That's part of the whole relationship. Was he was a mentor. He really looked up to him, and to watch that relationship fall apart, it was sad. One quick thing we didn't, because we talked about the stealth segments with MJ and Miles breaking up the pacing. I'm surprised you didn't bring up the lab puzzles at all.
Ugh.
I did like one of them, and then I was like, "Fuck this."
Well, you had to do. You had to do a bunch of them throughout the story.
You could
No, I mean optionally.
Oh, could you? Yeah, you could have them auto solve, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could.
I don't know. I actually really liked those.
They were.
I liked them at first.
Yeah, I liked the first few times. It was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. It's like a Sudoku or some shit." And then, and I was like, man. After a few of them, I'm like, I didn't pay to play this. Like, just let me be Spider-Man.
They didn't do it nearly as much as like BioShock, but it was still annoying.
Yeah, like you could get in and out of the puzzle and be over like real fast, but I don't know. I thought they were fun. I do understand like they worked best as side content, not like Spider-Man's in the middle of a fight and he finds this chemical and he's like, all right, I finished beating up the baddies. All right, let's find out what kind of juice the baddies are using.
I just want to see like a cut of Spider-Man just standing still on a building doing this puzzle while he's like fucking infected with like some poison that's altering his mind and making him see giant penis tentacles coming out of the
my God.
water that's like rising. Oh my God, I fucking hated that whole segment.
He just sees a chemical in the street. He's like, all right. Takes his backpack off his back, goes in, pulls out his test tubes, like, let's do some science.
One thing about this game that I absolutely adore is how well it captured New York City. Like,
yes.
That, especially that, I think one of my favorite scenes, besides like when Miles Morales' dad died at City Hall, which is like a major like iconic area in New York City, the Grand Central segment was probably my favorite, and I don't know why I felt super compelled to put on the Iron Spider-Man suit and have like my like tentacles, like the legs come out of my back, whatever they're called,
tendrils, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. And
extremities.
So I actually went to because I work by there, so I went to Grand Central Station.
You put on your Iron Spider suit?
The game. I should have, but I definitely went there to like play Pokemon Go or whatever, and I was just standing there like, wow, like that was a really good way to do a mission in New York City. Like it looked just like it. I was like, holy shit, I can see Spider-Man swinging right now, like in Grand Central.
I got kind of excited when you go to Hell's Kitchen and like you can take pictures of Matt Murdock's like law firm and like the boxing place where he trains. I was half expecting Daredevil to show up like as a bonus thing at the end. I was like, that would have made me fucking. I might have forgiven like this game if Daredevil just showed up.
I exonerate your sins, game. Matt Murdock is here.
He's a way fucking cooler character.
I liked all all the landmarks were really cool to take pictures of. The little Marvel landmarks specifically were neat because there's a lot of I'm not a big comic book guy either, so the ones that I did
Sanctum
recognize,
Sanctorum,
yeah,
Yeah.
Doctor Strange's place. You can take a picture. Yeah.
and my favorite New York City landmark, the Avengers Tower.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was cool to see the like how the real New York City and the Marvel verse like blend together even in this game, and seeing
Right.
like those bars, the Wakanda embassy, Avengers
Mm-hmm.
Tower, all that stuff. It was really cool to see. And yeah, the New York City stuff was really neat. My one roommate works in New York City, and we went and tried to find like the building where he works, and we did find that it's not like a one-to-one New York. It is somewhat truncated. There are streets and parts
It
that are
has
just
to be.
cut. Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
I agree, but it was still really cool, and for what they pulled together, it really worked.
No, I agree. I will give them credit that, as someone who lives, I mean, Delaila, you live in New York City too, and you're right outside.
There's a
Mark.
wait. There's a New York City too.
This is why it's really hard for me to be chill all the time, because fucking people like you, Mark, will come in with cringe wannabe jokes like that. That's why.
Man, that's a quality joke. Get the fuck out of here.
Anywho, what I was gonna say was to complete my compliment. The fact that like we live here and see this shit every day, and it was still kind of cool and exciting to explore and go through it, I think is commendable to Insomniac Games. So good job, Insomniac.
Yeah.
Agreed. I also I didn't do it in this playthrough, but I remember doing it in the last one. I really like just going down on the street, walking amongst the pedestrians. Some of them will be like, "Hey, Spider-Man," and you can like do finger guns at them and give them high fives and stuff.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Also, there was a fun little Easter egg that one of the developers revealed on Twitter like months later after the game came out.
Oh God.
About the do you know what I'm talking about, Delilah?
The marriage proposal?
No, there's a marriage
Oh.
proposal?
Yeah, somebody asked to like propose to his wife in the game via like a neon sign or something like that, and she said no.
Oh.
So they something like that. I think it's been a while.
Oh, there's another big
Oh,
Easter egg that we totally didn't talk about. I'll get to that. But like the one that the guy revealed was that on Sunday you won't really see a specific NPC. They're like dressed in like traditional Jewish
Oh,
clothing.
the Jewish?
And since,
Yeah.
And since Sunday is the Sabbath, if you play on Sunday, you won't see that NPC
Yeah.
out on the streets at all.
Wait,
Yes.
how does it make sense?
I don't know. They had like a really good explanation, but it was a really cool Easter egg. The other big Easter egg
Wait,
that I
if it's Jewish, it would be Saturday.
all right, maybe I'm wrong.
Shomer Shabbos.
Maybe it's Saturday. I just mixed up the days, Jason. I'm sorry.
God, so anti-Semitic.
So the other one that I thought about or forgot about is at the Halloween party you can run into Greg Miller's shirtless Spider-Man.
I love that scene. Not just the shirtless Spider-Man, but like the whole Halloween party.
The whole segment was really cool. You get your only real sighting of a Mysterio in the game.
Yeah, in a costume.
but-
Someone in a costume, a Mysterio
Yeah.
costume.
Yeah, but yeah, the Greg Miller shirtless Spider-Man thing cracked me the fuck up when I saw it.
Yeah.
It really was just hilarious. And the story to come out of that after the game came out was like he thought it was going to be in the game, and then he wasn't so sure, and then he forgot about it, and the game came out, and turns out it's there, and he's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So it was really
Yeah.
interesting. The last thing we kind of glossed over it real quick was that it's a Marvel game, and what would a Marvel thing be without a Stan Lee cameo? We didn't really talk about it too much, so I thought I'd just bring it up one time before we close out.
That was Jason's favorite part of the game.
It was because it was a nice little bit of dialogue that made me laugh and made me, even though it's just a quick cameo, that nice little piece of dialogue that fit perfectly into the scene. Felt had more joy than any of the other dialogue between Mary Jane and Peter Parker. It was just like I was watching the scene and it's a total downer. Not that being a total downer is necessarily a bad thing, but like I didn't feel like there was any hints of any chemistry or particular intimacy between the two. I don't know. And then he made that remark as Peter Parker's leaving, and it just kind of brought me up, and I was like, "Oh, that was really awesome."
There
Oh,
you
that was
go.
as MJ was leaving.
Or as I'm sorry, as MJ was as they're leaving the restaurant,
Yeah.
and it's just
Any
I make these comments because I was more I wasn't angry. I'm not hating. I was more disappointed. I was expecting more.
any other final thoughts before I pose the final question?
I have a final question too.
Oh,
Yeah,
you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first
Okay.
because it's not that interesting. Uh, Actually, I have two of them.
Okay.
Okay. What was your favorite Spider-Man suit? That I know, Jason, you didn't unlock all of them, but
I only used one.
the advanced suit, the main one.
Uh, I don't think it was the main one. Whichever one makes the hollow Spider-Mans, the distraction Spider-Mans. I think it was the classic suit.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
My favorite was vintage Spider-Man, the one
Yeah,
that
I
made him
really
look like a
like.
comic book.
Yeah, I liked vintage. I liked vintage, but I liked using the stealth one during night missions or when I fought Scorpion
Okay.
because it was all like green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I that that vintage suit. Well, that was probably the one the suit besides advanced suit that I used the most because it just looks so cool. It just looks so dope, and somehow it worked so incredibly well. And the power up, especially that came with that suit, was just quips. And you just press
Oh
the power
yeah.
up button, and he just says something quippy. That's it. That's the power up. That's the whole
Yeah.
thing. And it just cracks me up that was the thing that they gave.
That's
I
pretty cool.
I loved it. It was that was hands down my favorite.
Yeah, I like how they had both the MCU Iron Spider suit and later in in a DLC did the comic book one.
Yeah, and I was also happy that they eventually gave the Spider-Verse suit was cool.
Oh yeah,
We did eventually get the
the
Tobey Maguire
Homecoming.
suit. Yeah, the
Oh
Homecoming
yeah,
suits
the
too.
Rummy, yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, what's your other question?
Um, Besides Venom, do you guys like anticipate any villains for Spider-Man
Oh,
2?
I don't
that was my
anticipate.
final question.
Oh, my
I don't.
bad.
I mean, obviously, yeah, like you just said, the Osborn storyline is going to continue.
Yeah, that's one last thing that
Um,
I did want to mention was when you're in that little secret lab of his in his penthouse, you do see like the goblin bomb, the pumpkin bombs, and that you also see that he's developing this really advanced helmet. I feel like that's really heavily the pumpkin bombs especially is really heavily alluding to him becoming Green Goblin.
Yeah.
uh, I feel definitely of any villain, they're going to bring back Wilson Fisk to have a much larger role in the next story.
Yeah.
Um, just because he is such an integral part of from at least what I've seen of Marvel's New York universe. I don't. I'm anticipating in the next game that they're going to pull in not just Miles Morales, but they're going to pull in like another hero, like possibly a defender, like someone like Daredevil.
Okay,
Yeah.
that could be cool. Yeah, I besides Green Goblin and Venom, um, maybe spoilers again for the DLC, but maybe Uri's Wraith will probably show up in some capacity. Maybe probably more as a side villain or side quest line, not part of the main plot, but I
Yeah.
think she'll be there in some capacity. Yeah, Harry is Venom. I don't know if I see as a villain. I'm kind of thinking the plot might go down as Osborn is a disgraced mayor. The city's not happy with him anymore, so he becomes Green Goblin. Harry becomes
Well,
Venom.
Venom isn't just a villain. Like
I
he's
know
also been.
he's an anti-hero.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that he might play off as a villain in the maybe the first arc or the first act, maybe the first half of the game, but he will become an anti-hero.
They
Wind
like
up,
learn to work together.
yeah, he'll wind up helping Peter and Miles take down Norman as Green Goblin. That's kind of what I'm anticipating, which I think will be a really interesting plot because he's going to have to cope with taking down his own father.
That as a pitch actually does sound like a fucking awesome plot.
There you go. You heard it. You heard it, Insomniac. Me and Jason both. You should bring us.
You know why? Because we've actually had build-up investment in these characters, and now we see them put in this conflict, and then there's resolution.
Well, Jason, we already have resolution. It's typically 1080p. If you have a PS4 Pro and a 4K TV, you can play. You can play it in 4K.
You're so lame, Mark. You're so lame.
Any other villains? Any other notes? Any other comments?
Maybe Craven or Lizard.
Yeah, those could be cool. Those could be cool.
Well, we'll see. Definitely Venom, though. We know that.
I think it is safe to say. Oh, you know who I'd love to see? Carnage.
Oh yeah, that will come from Venom, I think.
I
hope.
wonder if they would do both so soon.
Well, that might be tie into part of Osborn's storyline in the next one, maybe accidentally as a result of some immoral research or project he's doing to try to find some sort of cure. He ends up bringing Carnage or whatever into the universe.
Maybe.
Yep.
I would be totally into that. I've always really found Carnage to be compelling, creepy, terrifying. That would be dope. All right. Do we want to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. You just listened to Jason bitch and complain about Spider-Man, and Delaila and I desperately trying to defend it.
Critique.
I am a critic of the highest order.
All right, so yeah, that was our episode of Reap the Spoils about Marvel's Spider-Man for PS4. Hopefully you played the game before you get to this point, because otherwise you're gonna have a much less of a fun time playing through the game after listening to us talk for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. And next episode will be
what are we playing?
Tales of the Borderlands.
Tales from the Borderlands. All right, it's decided. It's official, Jason. That's what we got to play. For next episode. With with the impending release of Borderlands 3 on September 13th, I feel like this is one of the more overlooked entries in the franchise, and it will be necessary to know to get the full effect of the plot. So we will be.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Is it like directly? They said it directly ties in. Okay.
Yes, it will be tying in. It is part of the plot. It's part of the lore, if you will. So we will be playing through Tales from Borderlands and doing a spoilercast on that next month.
Well, that's good, because all I really know about the franchise is there's a dumb little robot. That's all I remember from like the first game.
You just listened to Reap the Spoils. My name is Mark Sullivan. You can follow me at Nibbleheimen. You can follow Delaila at Assassina_San.
Yes.
You can follow Jason at Solid Quaz, but don't follow him because he doesn't do jack shit on Twitter.
I think I got rid of my Twitter. I don't know.
No, you still have it. You just don't use it.
It's still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay.
And you can follow the group as a whole at Dead Cell Media on Twitter. And if you like this video, you should give it a like. You should give us a subscribe. You should comment and tell us what you liked. What would you like to see? Is there any game specifically you'd like us to play and cover? Like, let us know in the comments. We would love that. There's also a Facebook group. Go to the Facebook group. Join the Facebook group.
And please leave in the comments which one of us three is the best.
I feel like that's just going to lead to disappointment, Jason.
I don't know, Mark. I'm a humble man. You have a bit of an ego. You need to work on it.
All right. Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios, amigos. And vote for Pedro.